Hello, welcome to Global. I'm Rajesh Merchandani. If you broke it, you fix it. That's the problem facing the United States and the UK at the moment. Many in those countries say they can trace the current conflict in Iraq back to the war against Saddam Hussein in 2003. So the dilemma now is how far should they and the rest of the world intervene to stop the advance of Islamic State fighters and bring some safety and relief to people caught up in the violence. An estimated 30,000 Yazidis are trapped on Mount Sinjar. One United Nations official is warning of a potential genocide within days or even hours. Now we're hearing the US will send around 130 military personnel to help the Kurds, that France will arm Kurdish fighters, but full military intervention seems out of the question. Is it the right decision, though? Nick Childs reports.
With every image and every passing day, the potential scale of the humanitarian disaster unfolding in northern Iraq is becoming more apparent. For the most innocent, it's been a frightening, grueling and painful flight from the fighters of the Islamic State. At this camp in the Kurdish area of neighbouring Syria, they're doing what they can. For those who now have nothing, picking through the clothes donated by locals is something. But much more is needed.
The situation in the camp is still kind of primitive. We're trying to improve it, to make it better, to increase the tents. Lots of people are without tents. Toilets need to be increased, but we are doing our best to upgrade the standard of the camp so that it is at least gaining their dignity.
More US airdrops to those still trapped on Mount Sinjar. Also 130 more US personnel on the ground in the city of Erbil to assess in depth what more needs to be done. But
as the President has made very clear, we're not going back into Iraq in any of the same combat mission dimensions that we once were in Iraq. Very specifically, this is not a combat boots on the ground operation.
A third wave of British airdrops of clean water and, crucially, shelter kits for those exposed on the mountainside. Britain has also sent tornado jets to Cyprus, their task reconnaissance for the humanitarian operation. And it's sending helicopters for possible relief missions or to transport equipment to the Iraqi Kurdish forces fighting the militants. And France has now announced it's about to supply weapons to the Kurds. In the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, new unease following a bomb attack near the home of Iraq's new Prime Minister-designate. And the supporters of the man he's meant to replace have also been demonstrating their defiance, as has the man himself.
I confirm once again that this government will continue and there will not be a replacement for it without a decision from the federal court. We hope that everybody commits to this legal and constitutional process and spares the country further instability.
All this will only fuel doubts as to whether Iraq's leaders and people can unite to take on the militants. Nick Childs, BBC News.
So chaos, political instability seeming to reign in Iraq. Let's speak now to Lukman Faily, who is Iraq's ambassador to the US. He joins us live from Manchester. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for speaking with us. First of all, let me try and get a sense from you about who is actually in charge of Iraq at the moment. Who's leading the government right now?
Thank you for having me. We have already an ongoing Prime Minister Maliki. He's in a caretaker situation according to the Constitution. The President and the other politicians are looking into the next phase. As you may know, there are issues regarding with the judiciary regarding the next Prime Minister. But for now, we have our Prime Minister Noor Maliki. He's running Iraq.
Except the US wants him to go, Iran wants him to go, even his Shia colleagues don't want him anymore, and he can't unite the country.
Well, as I said, this is an issue. We are new to democracy. This is an issue with the judiciaries. They are looking into it. The President's, His Excellency, already nominated a Prime Minister nominee, so that's already taking place. At the same time, the current Prime Minister put a case in court, and we're looking at that. As a democracy, we will have to wait for the result of that. The formation of the government are also taking place. So I think I would say that we're just waiting for that decision. And at this moment, Prime Minister Maliki is the current Prime Minister of Iraq.
But time's not really on your side as you wait for that decision, do you? Is it really?
No, we have had an issue since, has been escalated since early June. That time has not been with us. We have an urgency for a political process, but we also have an issue with on the ground with relation to ethnic cleansing, in relation to our fight against terrorism. That should not be put aside because of the politics. That's an urgent situation. We need support. America and the United States and others have already placed some support, some Europeans as well. We welcome all of that. We should not wait until the politics sort itself out.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yes, we all know that.
What more support, what more help do you think Iraq needs to fight back the Islamic State forces?
It's mainly on 3 tracks. You have the humanitarian side, as your news items highlighted that. We need more in relation to aids, airdrops and so on, provisions of sanitations and so on for those who are besieged. So we have basic humanitarian needs in relation to minorities, ethnic cleansing is taking place, so that's an immediate. We also have a political need for cooperation with the neighbors. They are as much as impacted and will certainly be in the near future if we not all act together. And we also need help in relation to the security, where provisions of arms, trainings and so on. We have said that we don't want boots on the ground from the United States.
Right, so you're very firm about that, even if they are thinking about it, and we don't know that Washington is even thinking about it. They say publicly they're not. You don't want it.
I'm not aware that they are even thinking about it. We have not asked for it. We think we have the troops on the ground. We need training. We need counterterrorism cooperation, certainly. We also need to provide some ammunitions and so on, and we're working on that, and we're paying for that as well.
Also, the US is now reportedly arming the Kurds. The French have said they will arm the Kurds. The US is sending military observers to the Kurds. It's all going to the Kurds. Why is the Iraqi military taking a back seat in this fight against Islamic State fighters?
No, we're not taking back seats. We have fighting across all fronts. The ISIL have recently mounted an attack trying to go into Arbil. That has been the key issue. We are working, we have what we might call joint counter operation centers with the United States and the KRG government. So we're working together. We have too many fronts. Iraq is the forefront or the battlefield for fight against international terrorism. This is not a pure local issue. It should not be looked at from that perspective.
Do you think, or do you have a concern that, you know, the military advisors America is sending include Marines and special forces? Do you think they may end up getting drawn into combat themselves? Are you worried that there may be what they call mission creeps like?
No, no. On the mission creep, we've been clear in our discussion with our White House and with our European friends and even with the United Nations when our foreign minister made a request to the United Nations for support. We are clear that we have enough troops on the ground. We don't need further troops. Certainly not American or any of the Europeans, but we need help. Surely we can find a middle formula in which it can provide enough help, yet we don't need to have boots on the ground.
Okay. Lukman Faily, the Iraqi ambassador to the US, we thank you very much for speaking with us. And let's turn to my studio guest who joins me now. Sajjad Jihad is an Iraqi commentator and researcher. You're listening to the ambassador with me there. What do you think Iraq needs now to stabilise and drive back the Islamic State forces?
So I back the comments of the ambassador that Iraq isn't just fighting a local issue for itself. The fact is that Iraq is very valuable if the Islamic State further entrenches itself, makes more gains, very vital oil fields, for example, south of Erbil, which is why there was an international response, and so on, then it will be very difficult to dislodge. So now is the time for action if the world wants to prevent ISIS from actually forming a semi-state, in effect, and because it then becomes even more difficult.
So what action should that be?
So I myself and a colleague have proposed a 6-point plan. The first is immediate military support, which is composed of 2 parts. Number 1 is delivering weaponry to the Iraqi government, like has been done to the Kurdish government, which is most welcome, but to make sure that the Iraqi government is at the forefront of the battle against ISIS, rather than militias and so on and so forth, which we want to avoid, and local armed groups. And also conducting strikes, because the Iraqi Air Force is very, very weak, at least to prevent from ISIS from making any further gains, to push them back.
Well, that's happening. What are the other points?
That's number 1. Number 2, we want UN-sanctioned action. the border between Iraq and Syria has disappeared. There needs to be a way to push ISIS back, at least out of Iraq. If they don't want to act in Syria, let them act in Iraq.
So what UN-sanctioned action? Peacekeepers?
Yes, on the ground. Put a safe haven for these minorities that are facing genocide. We don't want a situation like Rwanda. It's already happening, and it could be getting worse, and the international community doesn't even know about it on the ground.
So let's push ahead with these 6 points. What's
that's number 2.
Yeah.
Number 3, we want to make sure that we can secure the southern part of Iraq, which is producing all of Iraq's economy. So it's producing 3 million barrels of oil a day.
Oil fields.
So that needs to be beefed up, the security. So if it can be supporting the local forces, Iraqi forces, with extra equipment, training and so on, that would be great. Or talking to Iraq's allies on the other side, the international community's allies on the other side of the border to secure the border. That's helpful. Number 4, humanitarian aid increase, rather than just dropping packages which are imploding on the ground, actually making sure that we're able to do it more effectively and increase it. And number 5, we're looking at making sure that we pressure US allies in the region who have allowed ISIS to become this strong, either through funding or recruitment or extremist breaches. Unfortunately, Saudi and Turkey have been quite lenient with how they've dealt with ISIS supporters. And number 6, Iraq has failings. It's a new democracy, as the ambassador said. Let's treat Iraq as an equal. Let's go in and partner with Iraq rather than tell them, you should appoint this guy and get rid of this guy and you're doing it wrong. Treat them as an equal, but as a new democracy.
Now, that's an interesting point. Sorry to rush you through your 6 points there, but I do want to ask you some other questions. That last one's very interesting, though. How do you treat Iraq as a partner when there is no political stability in the country? Okay,
so firstly, you don't want elements of bias. The Assyrian Christians and the Shia Turkmen and Shia Shebek for 2 months have been massacred by ISIS, but the international community did nothing. And then suddenly the reason has been it's for the Yazidis and it's because of Erbil. How do you think that makes local communities in Iraq feel? They don't feel that they're treated as equals
so the West has been
Yazidis.
Too late on the humanitarian side.
Right, and not treating them as equals. Shia blood and Christian blood, Assyrian blood and Turkmen blood is no less than Yazidi or Kurdish blood. So that's a very, very important point. And local communities are hostile to the US because of this. And it's happened in 1991 as well, when they allowed Saddam to crush the uprising. The US watched on while the Shia uprising was crushed. And George Bush himself, the president at the time, asked for the population to rise up. So when we talk about treating as equals, it's not just at the political level, but it's actually treating the people in Iraq as equals. Secondly,
do you think Haider al-Abadi, the new Prime Minister designate, can actually recast Iraq as a partner for other countries and also bring political stability?
Well, he's had some welcoming comments from the neighbours in the region and also from the international community, which is a good start. I think he'll know that there was failings from the previous government. I don't think that anyone will deny that, but obviously it's a new democracy. So the challenges that come with that, the issues of there is corruption in the armed forces. Nobody will deny that. That's what led to the collapse of Mosul. But we want to make sure that we give him all the support, rather than immediately accuse him of being a similar person to the previous Prime Minister and he's from the same party and so on. Let's say, look, give him a clean slate. Let's push forward as much support to the government, rather than proxies and local groups, which is really unfair. So if you support only the Kurds and not the central government, that's unfair. If you support certain militias, that's unfair. If you support Sons of Iraq and awakening groups and so on, that's unfair. Let's treat everyone as equals in this and, push Iraq forward.
OK, inshallah. All right, Sajjad Jiyad, thank you very much for coming in and speaking with us.